Good morning and welcome to Glenwood Lutheran Church and our weekly e-devotion. My name is Pastor Mark Manning. As we gather this weekend for our Labor Day worship, it's our last Sunday in the park worship. It's also the beginning of 5 weeks of hearing from the New Testament letter entitled James, attributed to James. We're not sure which James it is. I want to talk just a little bit about this letter today because it's somewhat controversial for Lutherans especially. So I want to talk a little bit about it. James as a part of the books of what we call the Bible or the New Testament. In AD or BCE, in the Christian era, CE, the Christian era, about 170, there's a list of the books of the Bible called the Muratorian Canon. Well, let me cut to the chase. It doesn't list James at all as one of the books in what we think of as the Bible. It's not until about 350 CE that this letter attributed to James is really mentioned, and it's not until 357 CE that it is actually quoted by anyone. And so it seems to, if it's existed for some times, it's not been really truly recognized as apostolic or as important. Now, over the course of the first part of the church, St. Jerome works hard to get it in his Latin Bible. We call it the Vulgate Bible, and he includes James in there. And Augustine really gives it he considered it to be fully apostolic authorship, someone who is of Jesus' own time and place. Luther, on the other hand, puts this all into, it throws it all up in the air. Okay. And this is, I want to read you what Luther said about James. He didn't, in his own time, really think it occupied a position like the other epistles, the other letters that are written. And he had this to say about James. In sum, the gospel and the first epistle of St. John, St. Paul's epistles, especially those to the Romans, Galatians, and Ephesians, and St. Peter's first epistle, are the books which show Christ to you. They teach everything you need to know for your salvation, even if you were never to see or hear any other book or hear any other teaching. In comparison with these, the epistle of James is an epistle full of straw, because it contains nothing evangelical. But more about this in other prefaces. And in these other prefaces to books that he's writing, he kind of lays out his thinking about James. First, in direct opposition to Paul and the rest of the Bible, in James we hear justification ascribed to works. And he quotes Abraham wrongly as one who was justified by his works. And he says, well, this is obviously a sign that it was not of the apostles. And then secondly, it doesn't really give to Christians any instruction or reminder about Jesus Christ's passion, resurrection, or the Holy Spirit of Christ. It mentions Christ only twice in it. And, for Luther, you test it you test a letter like this by examining really how focused is it on Christ. And he says this: the true touchstone for testing any book is to discover whether it emphasizes the prominence of Christ or not. What does not teach Christ is not apostolic, not even if it's taught by Peter or Paul. On the other hand, here's where Luther is at his finest. On the other hand, what does preach Christ is apostolic, even if Judas, Annas, Pilate, or Herod does it. Well, there you have Luther at his finest, driving home his argument. He says that that the Epistle of James just drives you to the law, and it works. He mixes one thing to another to such an extent that I expect some good and pious man assembled a few things said by the disciples of the apostles, and then he put them down in black and white. Or perhaps the epistle was written by someone else who made notes of a sermon of his. So again, Luther had a mixed feeling. He does accept some of the advice. He does accept that it moves us toward ethical behavior and care and love of our neighbor, but that it does not really preach Christ, and certainly does not preach Jesus Christ crucified and raised from the dead. Well, as we hear James over the next 5 weeks, we'll have a chance to hear what he does have to say, but we'll also have a sense for what he maybe hasn't said either. God bless you as we worship together and prepare for the fall.